Good morning. Wally and Betty's grandchildren have just lit candles symbolizing the love each one of them has for Wally. The song you just heard was Betty and Wally's love song titled La Vie en Rose. It was a love song that was popular in 1948 when Betty and Wally first met in Paris, France. As a spokesperson for the family, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming and joining us today to celebrate Wally's life. We are especially pleased that one of Wally's brothers from England is able to be with us today, Roe McCall. Roe is in the front here with Betty, and he is representing all of Wally's English relatives. I'd like to introduce Jim Ripley, a friend of Wally's, who will be sharing some memories of Wally. Jim?
Some of you have probably had this same experience. You go to a memorial service for a friend you've known for years, and you hear all sorts of fascinating things about them that you didn't know. That's how I felt about Wally Broadbent, as I've heard others say lately how much he meant to them. I've known Wally for 35 years, but we almost always worked in different parts of PR. But it's only lately, with both of us retired, that we've been together more. We were both regulars in a small group of PR people who meet for lunch every couple of months. As a member of that group, I received a note from Betty last March telling us Wally had inoperable cancer. She said he knew the prognosis was poor, but his attitude was great and she was proud of him. Whatever happened, he was thankful for the 73 years he'd had. He started chemotherapy then. And in between chemo sessions, he got a home computer and went on the internet. And typically, he picked a unique email address. It went like this: WBSQYR. Well, WB, that's easy, Wally Broadbent. But those other letters, Wally was having fun with us. The secret's in the pronunciation. SQYR, Wally Broadbent, Esquire. A friend joked that Wally's probably the only U.S. West retiree who turns on his computer every morning to access the Manchester Guardian. But it wasn't. During the past summer, the members of our luncheon group exchanged whatever information we had about Wally, and we began to hear anecdotes about Wally from old friends. For example, Wally had been manager for the telephone company in St. Peter, Minnesota. That was before he was transferred to corporate headquarters in Omaha. A move like that is a vote of confidence and usually involves a pay raise, but there's a downside. Back in small town America then, the manager of the phone company was looked up to, a real civic leader. At headquarters, he became just another face in the management crowd. But it wasn't long before Wally hit his stride. He went to NWB's new corporate television studio and distinguished himself there. A co-worker, John Riviera, says this: "What I remember most is how helpful Wally was to all newcomers and to anyone else who needed help. He was a rock, the cornerstone of the group, and someone we all looked up to. In fact, our group thought so well of him, we gave him a plaque honoring him as our founding father." Wally was generous and confident, a happy-go-lucky guy who had his priorities well in place. Tom Lee echoed these sentiments from the perspective of a writer who wrote scripts for TV productions. He says that in the studio control room, Wally was determined to make other people look good. Quote, "He became a TV production expert, an artist really, who kept people on track and handled corporate bureaucracy with elan and great wit." along with some powerful, frightening, limey swearing if the occasion called for it. Lee tells of a time when he was stuck with a complicated program patterned on the TV Wheel of Fortune show. He even had a Wheel of Profit constructed for it. Another member of the TV studio crew was to be producer, but failed to produce. This came to head in the control room a little before the taping began. Wally realized how bad the situation was. He blew his stack, then calmed down, did what he could, and the show went off. Tom says, Wally saved my rear end that day, and the producers too. Karen Stott worked with Wally in the studio. Oh my, I'm getting old. She remembers that he was a voracious reader and also a happy whistler. He'd be editing a TV show and he'd get a piece of music in his head and he'd whistle it endlessly. And I remember, she said, what a source of joy Betty was to him. Wally would come to work and share with us whatever unusual thing Betty had just done. Like making a huge wind chime out of the tree in the front yard, or painting the garage floor like a giant jigsaw puzzle. On a more serious note, Karen said Wally was the main reason TV studio clients from all over NWB territory preferred to come to Omaha to have their programs produced. Wally's boss, Jim Ashworth, says Wally was a very dedicated employee who didn't need supervision. Jim was proud of how Wally upgraded an existing appointment calendar listing community programs available from NWB, and later that calendar was honored as best in the Bell system. Fran Eden, another of our luncheon group, has her own special memories. Wally was brilliant, she says. He knew everything about everything. He was a walking encyclopedia. When I was learning about photography and had a question, I'd go to Wally, and he always had the answer. Arnie Albrecht also remembers Wally fondly. He was Wally's district manager when Wally was in St. Peter. And Arnie liked to claim that Wally was a war bride. Well, if you've read the back of your program, you know what the story really was. Wally was English. Betty and he did meet in Paris. La Vie en Rose was their song. And Betty played that song for Wally the night before he died, and he was able to respond to it. Tom Lee says this about Wally's Royal Marine background. His muscular, tattooed arms suggest a British Popeye, but he was too well read and articulate for that. Too much couth. However, Tom continued, I suspect that he's lifted more weight and won more fights than all the rest of us. Tom's son Eddie is now the managing editor of the St. Peter Herald, and he still runs into older people who remember Wally and Betty. One of them is Bob Weddergren. Bob had provided some story ideas for Eddie, and he and Eddie became good friends. Well, almost 40 years ago, Weddergren and Wally had been pals. Bob recalls the time he nearly blew that Englishman's head off on a hunting trip. He was walking behind Wally when his gun went off accidentally, and the bullet whizzed past Wally's ear. He never let me forget it, Bob said, and they both laughed about it a few weeks ago when they got back in touch. Wally Broadbent was many things to many people. I particularly like the way Tom Lee summed it up. Quote, I think of him as a practical poet, a tough, lean, literate Brit who could write and speak the King's English and our corruptions of it better than we could. He could turn a phrase or turn the air blue or blue pencil copy expertly. Speaking for myself, I really wish I had known Wally better and much sooner.
Hello, my name is Jim Kalal, and I'm a little nervous, I must say. I've been in the entertainment business for a number of years. Met Wally years ago at Northwestern Bell working on a project, a couple different projects, and so I'd met him only a couple times, but it had to have been at least 20 years ago, I'll bet. You know, Betty, and so that I'm very honored to be here today. That he would think that much of my talent to honor him. So he asked if I would recite some poetry. By the way, I usually sing at funerals, and I really don't care that much for them either. You know, I mean, as far as singing at them, and now I'll try to talk and get through this, but please bear with me. This is titled From the Prophet by Cahill Gibran. How can I go on in peace and without sorrow? Yet I can tarry no longer. I shall become a boundless drop in a boundless ocean. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and melt into the sun? What is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides? When you have reached the mountaintop, then shall you begin to climb. When the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance. My longing shall gather dust and foam for another body. A little while, a moment of rest upon the wind, and another woman shall bear me. This next poem is titled Katrina's Sundial by Henry Van Dyke. Time is too slow for those who wait, too swift for those who fear, too long for those who grieve, too short for those who rejoice. But for those who love, time is eternity. Hours fly, flowers die. New days, new ways pass by. Love stays. It is not often a man can read poetry and have the poet in the audience. These next two poems are by Wally's brother, Roland McCall. The first is titled, Each One of Us. Each one of us is born to die and leave those left behind to cry. Sometimes I wonder why. And yet I know it has to be, or we'd never bounce a baby upon our knee, or watch our little children grow, share their joy, and love them so. Our memory will last and last until it fades in the distant past. And then forever we will be just a little twig in the family tree. Very nice, Roland. This next one is titled, It's Sad. It's sad we cannot always help when there's a need to do. It's sad we have intentions and do not see them through. It's sad we sometimes say such things that make each other cry. But the saddest thing in life is that we have to say goodbye. Very nice.
My wonderful wife, Holly, was planning to read this today. However, she felt she wouldn't be able to. This next reading is an expression by Holly of how Betty feels about her life with Wally. And it's titled, Is the Love of My Life Really Gone? His beautiful eyes, his tender embrace, the warmth of his hand, that gorgeous face. Hand in hand we traveled the world, talking and walking along the ocean shores, all the while collecting seashells and memories, only stopping to watch the setting sun. Oh, how beautiful our memories together. Is he really gone? No, for his legacy lives on. I still see him when I gaze upon the faces of the children, or when I stroll along his garden with the flowers all in bloom, or when I look upon his books that cover the entire room. His paintings and artwork will always move me, for they clearly portray the depth of this man that I so deeply love. His words still grace my lips and will stay forever fresh in his love letters. When our song is being played, he is with me in spirit, and when the wind brushes my cheek, I feel his gentle caress. When the sunshine pours into my room, I feel his warmth enfold me. His special love will never fade from my heart. Is he really gone? How could he be? For his love has made a beautiful imprint on my soul. Thanks, honey.
Let's say goodbye with a smile, dear, just for a while, dear. We must part.
everyone. My name is Joe Lipsy, and I'm the son-in-law of Betty and Wally. A few weeks ago, Heather and I were helping Betty sort through many of Wally's personal papers. And one of the gems we discovered was an essay that Wally had written about his philosophy of life. He was asked to write it as part of an application process to be considered for promotion at Northwestern Bell in Rochester, Minnesota in January 1956. It tells us a lot about what Wally stood for, the kind of man he was. It's also a pretty good description of the way he lived his life, and we want to share it with you now. Men are 1,000 times more intent on becoming rich than on acquiring culture, though it is quite certain that what a man is contributes more to his happiness than what he has. This philosophy by Schopenhauer, although written 150 years ago, adds strength to my own philosophy of life. Today, as throughout the centuries, man has lost sight of the wisdom of these words due to the importance society has placed on material wealth. From the cradle to the grave, most men strive for the material possessions of life, often oblivious to the spiritual wealth surrounding them. What fools we are to keep believing that through the achievement of wealth, our desires will be gratified. I am rich indeed with the love of a wife and daughter, the beauty of nature, the pleasure of a job well done, the sincerity of true friendship, the knowledge that I can derive from books and the wonder of things that are and yet to be, the privilege of living in a country where nothing is impossible. What manner of man would I be if I could forsake all this for the power of the coin? Yet instinctively, I know that I must pursue it in order to provide for my family. To what heights must a man rise to secure his happiness? I could be 100 feet tall, yet without compassion and understanding for my fellow man, I would be but an infinitesimal being. An abundance is mine if in my lifetime I can remember to do the right thing in the right way, to give it value and beauty, even without praise from another. Knowing that what I have done is my best work, I will feel no need to envy those who have done better or those who have gained larger rewards. H.W. Broadbent, Rochester, Minnesota, January 1956.